Clara Mae Whitcomb took the milk pail from Eli Mercer's hand and did not flinch when the men outside the mercantile began to laugh. She was 23 years old, soft through the cheeks, heavy through the hips, and built in the generous way that made cruel men think they had already learned everything worth knowing about her. The pail looked small against her skirt. Her bonnet sat low against the July sun. Dust clung to the hem of her dress. Behind the mercantile window, two women stopped folding calico just to stare. Eli Mercer stood beside her, with his hat in his hands, looking as if he had hired desperation itself. His ranch, the Red Lantern, lay 8 miles south of Glory Bend, Wyoming territory, and everybody in town knew it was sliding toward auction. His dairy herd was giving thin milk, his beef cattle were losing weight, his hay meadow had gone patchy, his note at Pruitt Bank was due before the first frost. So when Eli placed a handbill asking for a dairy girl, and Clara Mae answered it, the town took it as one more sign that the Red Lantern had come to the end of its luck. "She won't last 2 mornings," a freighter called from the hitching rail. "She'll tire before the first cow does," another said. Clara Mae looked at neither of them. She set the empty pail on the boardwalk, pulled a folded paper from her pocket, and signed Eli's agreement with a pencil sharpened by her own knife. Her hand was calm. Her letters were plain and even. Eli saw the laughing faces behind her. He saw the red in her cheeks, though whether from heat or humiliation he could not tell. He had half a mind to tell the men to mind their tongues, but before he spoke, Clara Mae handed the paper back to him. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "how many cows are you milking?" 12. "How many were you milking last spring?" 18. "And how much cream did Pruitt Station pay you for last week?" Eli blinked. "You haven't even seen the ranch." "No," Clara Mae said, "but I saw your cream cans stacked behind the station. 3 were stamped with your mark, and only 1 had fresh skim on the rim. Either your cows are failing, or somebody is making sure the cream does not reach market under your name." The men at the rail stopped laughing. Eli Mercer looked at her differently then. Not kindly, not yet, just more carefully. Clara Mae picked up the pail again. "If you hired me only to pull milk from a cow, you hired too little. If you hired me to find out why your dairy is dying, then I'll need to see your spring before sunset." Eli did not know what to say to that, so he said the only thing that came, "The wagon's this way." She followed him without looking back at Glory Bend. She had spent enough of her life being looked at. She had learned long ago that mockery was a kind of weather. You endured it, kept your feet under you, and watched the ground for what other people missed. The road to Red Lantern Ranch rolled through dry sage and yellow grass, with the Wind River Mountains blue in the distance. Eli drove the wagon with the silence of a man who had used up most of his words on worry. Clara Mae sat beside a flour sack and watched the land. A person could tell much from a road if she had been taught properly. Wagon ruts told where freight still traveled. Weed growth told where water had once run. Fence lines told whether a man inspected his boundaries or only hoped they would hold. The Red Lantern came into view near sundown. It was not as ruined as gossip claimed, which interested Clara Mae immediately. The main house needed paint, but its porch stood square. The barn roof sagged on the west side, but not beyond repair. The corrals were swept. Harness hung oiled under the shed. A lazy man did not keep leather that way. A tired man did. The dairy cows stood in a fenced lot near the barn, 12 jerseys and shorthorn crosses, their hides dull under the dust. They lifted their heads when the wagon came in. Clara Mae counted ribs before she looked at udders. 2 cows held their tails wrong. 1 shifted weight from hoof to hoof. 3 had the hollow look of animals fed enough bulk and not enough nourishment. Eli jumped down and reached to help Clara, but she had already stepped from the wagon. "Where is the water trough?" He pointed toward the east side of the lot. "There." She walked to it. The trough was half full, green at the corners, with a chalky ring dried along the inside. She dipped 2 fingers, smelled them, then touched them to her tongue. Eli watched her face. "Alkali," she said. "It's from the creek." "Which creek?" "Dry Sister Wash. Runs most of the summer if you scrape it deep enough." She turned toward him. "Why are dairy cows drinking wash water?" "Our spring box clogged in May. Cass said the wash would hold until we repaired it." "Cass?" "My foreman. Cass Fowler." "Where is the spring?" Eli frowned. "North Meadow." "Show me." "You haven't unpacked." "Your cows are drinking poison by inches, Mr. Mercer. My bag can wait." He stared at her. No one had spoken to him in that tone since his mother died. There was no softness in it, but there was no cruelty either. It was the tone of someone who believed the problem mattered more than his pride. So he showed her. The North Meadow lay beyond a low rise, where grass should have grown thick around the family spring. Instead, half the meadow had gone silver brown, and a line of new stakes cut across the slope. The springbox sat under cottonwoods, dry at the lip, its wooden cover pried loose and set crooked. A thin stream leaked below it and vanished into trampled mud. Clara Mae knelt beside the box, her knees pressed into wet clay. Eli almost said something about ruining her skirt, then thought better of it. She ran her fingers beneath the warped cover and pulled out a packed wad of burlap, weeds, and silt. "This did not clog," she said. Eli's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean it was plugged." The meadow went quiet around them. A meadow could go quiet in a way a room could not. The grass, the cottonwoods, the insects, all of it seemed to hold itself still. Eli crouched beside her. "By who? That is not the first question. What is? Who benefits if your cows give bad milk?" He had no answer, but his mind moved at once to Gideon Pruitt, because every failing rancher in Glory Bend eventually thought of Gideon Pruitt. Pruitt owned the bank, the cream station, half the grain storage, and the patience of a spider. He smiled like a church deacon and wrote notes like a hangman. Clara Mae stood and looked at the survey stakes. Each one had a red cloth tied around the top. "Are those yours?" "No," Eli said. "Pruitt's man said they were for a county drainage measure." "Did the county send paper?" "No." "Did you ask?" He looked away. That was the moment Clara Mae understood the shape of him. Eli Mercer was not foolish. He was ashamed. There was a difference. Foolish men argued with truth. Ashamed men recognized it and hated the mirror. She softened her voice just enough. "Mr. Mercer, when a man is drowning, he will grip the first hand offered. That does not mean the hand is clean." He looked at the springbox, at the meadow, at the red survey cloth snapping in the wind. "What do? We clear the spring tonight. At dawn, I milk every cow myself, weigh each pail, separate the cream, and compare it against your old records. My old records are a mess. Then we start with the mess." Cass Fowler returned after dark, riding in from the south pasture with a coil of wire and a face that closed the moment he saw Clara Mae at the springbox. He was a narrow man with sunken cheeks, a drooping mustache, and the restless eyes of someone always measuring exits. Eli introduced them. Cass tipped his hat without warmth. "Didn't know we were hiring parlor help." Clara Mae wiped mud from her hands with a rag. "You still haven't." Cass smiled at that, but it did not reach his eyes. The three of them worked until lantern light shook over the water. Eli pulled the spring cover free. Clara packed silt out by hand. Cass did only what he was told, and too little of that. By midnight, the spring ran clear again into a temporary wooden channel toward the dairy lot. Clara stood in the dark and listened to water move. Animals understood clean water before men did. By morning, the cows would know. She slept in the pantry room off the kitchen, on a narrow cot beneath shelves of empty jars. Before lying down, she took a notebook from her carpet bag. It had belonged to her mother, Beatrice Whitcomb, who had run the cleanest cream room in Kansas before fever took her. The pages held butterfat tables, cream weights, notes on feed, and one sentence written in firm black ink. "Milk tells the truth before people do." Clara Mae touched that line with her thumb. Her mother had been a big woman too, broad-shouldered and strong, with hands that could soothe a heifer or slap a thief senseless. Men had called her ox, barrel, and worse. Then they brought her their sick cows and asked her what was wrong. Clara had learned early that ridicule and need often came from the same mouths. She rose before the sun. Eli was already in the yard, looking as if he had not slept. "I started coffee," he said. "Good. Don't drink it yet. Bring your scale." "My scale?" "The hanging scale in your tack room. And every clean pail you own." By first light, Clara Mae had the milking line arranged in a way Eli had never seen. Each cow was brought in separately. Each pail was weighed. Each yield was written down before the milk was strained. She worked steadily, her body strong and low on the stool. her forehead damp, her hands sure. If the cows resented a stranger, they did not show it for long. Clara spoke to them in low murmurs, not sweetly, but consistently. Cows liked consistency better than affection. Eli stood nearby, useless at first, then useful when she told him how. He carried full pails. He marked names. He held a nervous cow still with one palm against her flank. He watched Clara test the milk by sight, smell, and feel, and something in him shifted hour by hour. Cass leaned against the barn door, chewing a straw. "Seems a mighty grand fuss for milk," he said. Clara did not look up. Milk is where the money leaves quietly. Cass spat the straw into the dirt. By breakfast, Clara had 12 figures in her book and a cream pan set aside. She studied the numbers while Eli poured coffee with hands that wanted to tremble and refused. "Well?" he asked. "4 cows are sound but underfed. 3 are stressed from bad water. 2 are being milked after they should have been dried off. 1 has a hoof issue that makes her reluctant to walk to feed. And 2 are missing." Eli frowned. "Missing? You milked 12. You own 14 dairy cows." "No, 12. Your cream station records from last winter showed 14 producers. I saw the old tally board in the dairy room. Names scraped off, but not clean enough. Daisy and Larkspur were removed." Cass stopped chewing. Eli turned toward him. "Did we sell Daisy and Larkspur?" Cass shrugged. "You told me to thin the herd when feed ran short. I told you to sell cull beef stock. These were poor milkers." Clara lifted her eyes. "Daisy gave 21 pounds per morning in February. Larkspur gave 19. If those were poor milkers, I would like to meet your good ones." Cass's face colored. Eli's voice dropped. "Where did they go?" Cass pushed off the wall. "Auction yard in Casper. I got receipts." "I want them," Clara said. Cass glared. "You want them?" "Yes." "You ain't the owner." "No," she said. "I'm the woman who can count." The kitchen went still. Eli looked at Cass, and for the first time in months, his shame made room for suspicion. "Get the receipts," he said. Cass did not move. "Now," Eli said. Cass left with a hard set to his shoulders. Clara returned to her notebook. "He will bring paper. Paper may even look proper. But if Daisy and Larkspur were sold through Casper, their brands were recorded by the yard. We need that book." "You think Cass stole them?" "I think 2 of your best milk cows disappeared while your spring was plugged and your cream income fell. I think your foreman knew exactly which cows to remove. Whether he acted alone is the part we do not know yet." Eli sank into a chair. For a man who could lift fence rails all day, he suddenly looked unable to bear the weight of his own hat. "Cass has worked here 6 years. Then he knows where the weak boards are." That afternoon, Clara inspected the dairy room. It was clean on the surface, but she had been raised to distrust surfaces. The cream separator had been wiped, but not under the lip. The storage shelf had one pale rectangle where a ledger had recently sat. In the corner, behind a barrel of salt, she found 3 broken wax seals from Pruitt Cream Station. She held them in her palm. Eli stared. "What are those?" "Proof that cans were opened after sealing. By Pruitt Station? Or before reaching it?" Cass drives the cans in. "Yes." A sound came from Eli, low and wounded. It was not rage yet. Rage was cleaner. This was the pain before rage, when the heart still tries to excuse the knife. Clara closed her fist around the seals. "Do you have last year's cream receipts?" "In the desk." "All of them?" "I think so. Thinking has cost you enough." "Bring the desk." He almost smiled despite himself. Almost. They spent the evening at the kitchen table with receipts laid out by month. Clara arranged them in columns, not by date, but by butterfat weight. Eli watched as patterns appeared that had been invisible when the papers sat loose in a drawer. The decline began after the spring was abandoned. Then, a sharper drop after Daisy and Larkspur disappeared. Then another when Pruitt's hauling fee increased, though his station was the same distance from the ranch. "Look here," Clara said, tapping Mae's receipt. "The gross weight is written in Pruitt's clerk hand. The butterfat deduction is written darker, with another pen. Pruitt adjusted it? Someone did. And every adjustment favors him." Eli rubbed his face. "Why would he bother with milk money? The ranch note is what he wants. Milk money keeps you alive long enough to pay interest. Take enough of it, and you miss the note. Miss the note. He gets land." Land that looks half dead. Clara looked toward the north meadow through the dark window. Land with a spring, somebody wants. The next morning, Gideon Pruitt came to Red Lantern Ranch. He arrived in a black buggy drawn by matched bays, wearing a gray suit, too fine for the heat. His beard was trimmed to a point. His gloves were clean. Men like Pruitt had a way of carrying cleanliness, as if it proved innocence. Cass Fowler rode behind him. Clara watched from the dairy room door. Eli came from the barn, his face unreadable. "Mercer," Pruitt called, stepping down. "I hear you've taken on help." "I have." Pruitt's eyes found Clara. They moved over her, quick and dismissive. Then they returned, slower, when she did not lower her gaze. "Miss Whitcomb, is it? Cass tells me you've been stirring up concern over ordinary ranch troubles." "Cass talks more than he works," Clara said. Eli coughed once into his fist. Pruitt smiled thinly. "A sharp tongue does not cure debt." "No," Clara said, "but clear records do." That smile vanished for half a second, then returned. "My bank has an interest in this property. Any changes to water use, herd composition, or dairy operation should be discussed with me." "Your bank holds a note," Clara said. "It does not hold the cow's udders." Cass barked a laugh before he could stop himself. Pruitt's pale eyes cut to him, and the laugh died. Eli stepped forward. "What do you want, Gideon?" "To remind you that your payment is due in 6 weeks, and to advise you against trusting your future to someone whose experience may be exaggerated." Clara walked into the yard. Her skirt brushed dust. Her face was round and sunburned. Her hands were still red from morning milking. "My experience is not hard to test," she said. "Bring your station books. We'll compare them to Mr. Mercer's receipts." Pruitt looked at her as if she had slapped him with a wet cloth. "My station books are private. So is theft, until someone writes it down." Cass moved. Only a little, but Clara saw it. Eli saw it too. Pruitt put his gloves back on. "Be careful, Miss Whitcomb. A woman in your position has little to gain by making enemies." Clara smiled then, not warmly. "Mr. Pruitt, a woman who has been laughed at since childhood, does not frighten easily. Men already made enemies of me before I opened my mouth." Pruitt climbed into his buggy. 6 weeks, Mercer." The buggy rolled away with Cass following. Neither man looked back. Eli stood beside Clara in the yard until the sound faded. "You shouldn't have provoked him. He came provoked. He can ruin me. He already has been. The difference is now he knows somebody noticed." That night, Cass did not come to supper. By morning, he was gone. So were 3 pages from the ranch desk, 1 bay gelding, and a small packet of cash Eli kept hidden in a flour tin. But Cass had made one mistake. He had left in haste, and haste was where dishonest men grew clumsy. Clara found the mistake beneath his bunk, a scrap of blue paper torn from a Casper auction receipt. Not enough to prove a sale, but enough to show a date, a partial brand record, and one name. Vale Creek Dairy. Eli recognized it at once. Vale Creek belonged to Gideon Pruitt's widowed sister on paper, though everyone knew Pruitt had bought the place himself. Clara held the torn paper to the light. Daisy and Larkspur did not go to Casper auction. They went to Vale Creek. "And if we ride there, Pruitt will move them before we arrive." "Then what?" "Then we do not ride there first." She packed bread, cheese, her notebook, and the torn receipt. Eli saddled 2 horses, then hesitated when Clara came out. She saw the hesitation. She had seen it all her life, men measuring her body against the work ahead. "I can ride," she said. "I wasn't." "Yes, you were, but you're polite enough to dislike yourself for it. That will do for now." He looked ashamed. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed once. It was rusty, but real. They rode west, not toward Vale Creek, but toward the old stage road where Amos Bell kept a relay stable and remembered more than was healthy for men like Pruitt. Amos was nearly 70, with white whiskers, a bent back, and eyes bright as creek ice. He had known Clara's mother years ago, which softened him before Eli said a word. "Beatrice Whitcomb's girl?" Amos said. "Lord help the man who lies to you." Clara almost smiled. "That is what we're counting on." Amos remembered Cass driving 2 milk cows through after midnight 3 weeks prior. He remembered because one had a white blaze shaped like a candle flame, and because Cass paid for feed with a Pruitt bank note. "Were the cows branded?" Clara asked. "Mercer brand, plain as sunrise, but one had fresh scoring over it. Changed brand? Trying to make it look like a connected V. Bad job. Whoever did it was nervous. Eli's hands closed into fists. Amos gave a signed statement because old men who had watched thieves grow rich sometimes enjoyed being useful at the end. From there, Clara insisted they ride to the county recorder, not the sheriff. The sheriff played cards with Pruitt on Fridays. The recorder, Mrs. Althea Boone, had no patience for men with shiny boots. In the courthouse basement, between shelves of deed books and plat maps, Clara found what she had suspected since seeing the red survey stakes. The original Red Lantern deed granted full use of North Spring water and the meadow below it. But there was an old addendum, filed by Eli's father before Eli was born, that made the spring more valuable than anyone in town seemed to remember. The water right did not merely serve the ranch. It served any dairy operation within the parcel and could not be separated from the land without owner consent. Mrs. Boone adjusted her spectacles. Pruitt filed an inquiry on this same water right in April. Eli went still. On my land? He asked whether abandoned agricultural water could revert under territorial provision. Can it? Clara asked. After 5 years of non-use, sometimes. But not if resumed before petition, not if obstruction can be shown, and not if abandonment was induced by fraud. Clara's heart began to beat harder. When was the spring blocked? Mrs. Boone asked. May, Eli said. And you resumed use? 2 days ago. Mrs. Boone looked at Clara. Then he was too early, or you were just in time. On the ride back, Eli said very little. Clara did not press him. A person needed silence when the world rearranged itself. He had believed his ranch was failing because he had failed it. Now he was beginning to understand that failure had been cultivated around him like a poisonous crop. Near sunset, they stopped on a ridge above Red Lantern. The barn glowed red in the low light, finally worthy of the ranch's name. My father built that spring box, Eli said. I was 9. He let me hold the nails. Clara watched the wind move through the meadow. My mother built a cream room with her own hands, she said. After she died, my uncle sold the separators, the pans, all of it. Said a girl my size needed a husband, not a trade. Eli looked at her. What did you do? I learned the trade anyway. The answer settled between them like a promise. They reached the ranch after dark. Pruitt was waiting on the porch. He had not come alone. Sheriff Lohman stood beside him, hat low, thumbs hooked in his belt. Behind them, 2 of Pruitt's men sat horses near the barn. Eli dismounted slowly. Pruitt held up a paper. Your foreman reported stolen property concealed in your dairy room. Sheriff has authority to search. Clara understood immediately. Cass had not simply run. He had laid a trap on his way out. The sheriff would find something planted. A forged receipt. A packet of money. Anything to turn suspicion toward Clara or Eli before they could speak. Sheriff, Clara called, still mounted. Before you search that room, you should know Mrs. Boone at the recorder's office is expecting a written inventory of any items removed from Red Lantern property tonight. Sheriff Lohman's eyes narrowed. Is that so? It is. She also has copies of the spring deed and Mr. Amos Bell's statement regarding stolen cows. Pruitt's face hardened. Clara dismounted. Her legs ached, but she did not show it. Men like Pruitt fed on visible weakness. You may search, she said, but you will do it with Mr. Mercer present, with every item named aloud, and with your signature beside each line, unless you prefer Mrs. Boone asking why a sheriff searched a disputed property without inventory. The same day evidence was filed against Gideon Pruitt. The sheriff glanced at Pruitt. That glance was small, but it told everyone enough. Pruitt stepped forward. You overestimate your protection, Miss Whitcomb. No, she said. You overestimated my shame. The porch lantern threw light across her face. She looked tired, dusty, heavy, and immovable. All my life, she said. Men like you believed if they laughed first, they would not have to answer later. You laughed at my body, my work, my place in a room. You thought that made me smaller. It did not. It taught me to listen while you were busy talking. Eli moved beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. Leave my ranch, he said. Pruitt looked from Eli to Clara, then to the sheriff. For the first time, Uncertainty crossed his face. He left, but the battle did not end there. The next week moved like a storm that had learned to walk. Clara and Eli worked from before dawn until lantern light. They milked, they weighed, they repaired the spring box properly. They moved the dairy cows to clean pasture and fed them oat hay. Eli had been saving for winter. Milk yield rose first in ounces, then pounds. The cream thickened. Butter turned gold again. Every number went into Clara's book. Eli rode to neighboring ranches and asked questions he should have asked years before. He returned with stories that matched his own. Pruitt had advised one man to sell breeding cows cheap, then bought them through another name. He had told another rancher a creek right was worthless, then filed an inquiry on it. He had financed feed at punishing rates, docked cream unfairly, and waited for foreclosure. One by one, men who had been ashamed to admit they were drowning came to Red Lantern's kitchen. Some looked at Clara and saw only her size at first. Then she opened her notebook, asked for dates, receipts, brands, weights, and names, and their faces changed. Truth did that when it arrived, organized. The county hearing was held on a Thursday in Glory Ben's meeting hall because too many people came for the courthouse office. Pruitt arrived in his gray suit. Cass Fowler sat behind him, pale and sweating. Sheriff Lohman stayed near the door and avoided Mrs. Boone's gaze. Clara sat at the front table with Eli and Mrs. Boone. Her dress was plain blue. Her hands were folded over her notebook. The same men who had laughed outside the mercantile now crowded the back wall. Pruitt spoke first. He spoke well. Men with money often did. He called the matter confusion, unfortunate bookkeeping, rancher mismanagement, female interference, emotional accusation. Then Clara stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She began with milk. She showed the cream weights before and after the spring was blocked. She showed the water record. She showed how the cow's production rose after clean water returned. She showed the missing cows, the torn auction paper, Amos Bell's statement, and the altered brand mark. She showed the spring deed and Pruitt's April inquiry about abandoned water rights. She showed matching complaints from 6 ranchers. At each page, Pruitt seemed to shrink without moving. Cass broke first. It happened when Clara placed 2 wax seals on the table and asked why Pruitt Cream Station seals had been broken before delivery. Cass stood so fast his chair fell. "I didn't know he meant to take the whole place," he said. The hall erupted. Pruitt turned on him. "Sit down." But Cass had the look of a man who had carried fear too long and found it heavier than guilt. "He told me Mercer was finished anyway," Cass said. "Said I'd get steady work at Vale Creek if I helped move the cows and kept the spring out of use. Said nobody would listen to Mercer. Said nobody would listen to her." Silence followed that last word. Clara felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Years of laughter stood behind those eyes. Years of being underestimated. Years of being expected to bow her head and be grateful for crumbs of respect. She looked at Pruitt. "They listened today," she said. By sundown, Gideon Pruitt's accounts were seized for review. Cass Fowler was held for cattle theft. Sheriff Lohman suddenly remembered several duties elsewhere and was later replaced. The Red Lantern note was suspended pending investigation, then rewritten through a territorial lender who had no interest in stolen water. Daisy and Larkspur were returned from Vale Creek, thin but alive, and Clara cried only when no one was near enough to see. Except Eli did see. He had gone to the barn for a hammer and stopped when he saw her standing in the dairy room, one hand pressed to Daisy's neck, her face turned into the cow's warm hide. He did not speak. He understood by then that not every moment needed a man's voice placed on top of it. Autumn came in clean and gold. The north meadow thickened around the spring. The dairy lot smelled of hay instead of sour water. Red Lantern's cream cans went to market sealed, weighed, and paid proper. Eli rode his fences twice a week and wrote the condition of every section on a board Clara nailed inside the barn door. By October, the ranch was not saved, not entirely. Land did not heal because people wished it so. Cows did not grow strong in a day. Debt did not vanish because truth had finally stood up. But the Red Lantern was no longer dying. It was recovering. That mattered more. On the first cold morning of November, Eli found Clara in the dairy room, setting cream pans near the window. She had flour on one sleeve and a pencil tucked behind her ear. The sunrise touched her round face, her broad shoulders, her strong hands. She looked nothing like the helpless girl Glory Bend had mocked, because she had never been that girl at all. "I got a letter," Eli said. "From who?" "The Territorial Agricultural Office." She looked up. "They want your report copied. Said there are ranches in 3 counties with similar complaints against Pruitt's lending practices. They asked if you would consult." Clara stared at him. For once, words did not come quickly. Eli stepped closer, holding the letter out. "They asked for Miss Clara Mae Whitcomb by name." She took the paper. Her eyes moved over the lines slowly, as if she did not trust them to remain. Outside, Daisy lowed in the lot. The spring water ran clear in its trough. Somewhere beyond the barn, a hammer struck wood where one of the hired hands repaired the west fence before snow. "What will you do?" Eli asked. Clara folded the letter carefully. "I'll go where the work is needed." He nodded, though something in his face dimmed before he could hide it. She saw it. Clara Mae saw most things. "But Red Lantern needs work too," she said, "at least through winter." His eyes came back to hers. "And after winter?" he asked. She looked around the dairy room her hands had put right. The clean pans, the sealed cans, the ledger on the shelf, the place where truth had first begun speaking in milk and cream and quiet numbers. "After winter," she said, "we'll see what deserves saving next." Eli smiled then, not like a rescued man, and not like a man offering pity. He smiled like someone standing beside an equal, watching the same sunrise. Months later, when people in Glory Bend told the story, they changed it, according to their own comfort. Some said Eli Mercer hired a fat milk girl and got a bookkeeper, lawyer, dairywoman, and storm all in one. Some said Clara Mae Whitcomb had eyes sharp enough to read a lie through barn dust. Some said Pruitt fell because he cheated too many men. But the ones who had been there knew better. Pruitt fell because he made the mistake cruel people always make. He looked at a young woman's body and thought it told him the limits of her mind. He mistook silence for weakness, patience for fear, and shame for obedience. Clara Mae had carried every insult like kindling. Then, when the time came, she lit the whole truth on fire. Sometimes the truth begins in small, humble places. A milk pail, a spring box, a ledger no one bothered to read. Clara's courage reminds us to look closer, listen kindly, and never measure a person by appearances. When we keep steady hands, honest records, and faith in what can still be saved, even a tired place can bloom again. Please note, this story was created and fictionalized by AI for your entertainment, while also sharing a positive life lesson.